G'day cunts, Dean from Blog for the Blood God, and on today's episode of the BloodyOath Podcast, we have a very special guest, John Bianco, who recently went 5-1 at Hammerhead Games' major event. He was running a pure Emperor's Children Chaos Space Marine list, which is something that I've been playing with a lot myself lately, and I've done a few different tactical videos on it, so I thought it'd be a great opportunity to get him on and interview him and discuss his list. This is part one of a potential 3-part series. We recorded the first component where we talk about his list and some of the units in it, and we sort of hash out some of the reasons that they're in there and some of the potential alternatives. And then if this video is popular and you guys want to see more of it, we'll be doing follow-up videos where we're going to talk through the games that he played at the event and basically some of the challenges that he encountered and some of the lessons that he learned, as well as some of the secondaries that he took and some theory behind that and some tactics that he employed in that scenario, and really sort of digging down to the bottom and finding out the fundamentals of what made this list successful and some of the challenges that he had to overcome to get that success. So if you enjoy this video, make sure you chuck a comment below and let us know so that we can arrange to record the rest of this and dig deeper. And with that being said, let's just jump straight into the interview.
Blog for the Blood God presents the BloodyOath Podcast.
G'day Josh, thanks for taking time out of your day to join us here on Blog for the Blood God. Congratulations on your recent tournament results. I want to get stuck into those with you and see what we can pull apart and see what we can learn out of the Chaos Space Marine Codex and the Emperor's Children in particular. So I guess the best place to start is for you to just introduce yourself to the audience, let us know a little bit about yourself.
My name's John. This weekend we had the Hammerhead Major. It was 68 people. I think 2 people dropped before the tournament. We played it at 2 stores actually because there were so many people. So one of the local stores, we split it into 2 pods, and actually we had a charity for autism as well attached to it, which was really cool. You were able to pay $10 and like put each other in different pods and things like that. You can only be moved once.
Okay.
And I don't know if one of my friends paid for me or not, but I ended up in the deep end in the beginning of it and fought my way through it. It was a great time. I went 5-1. I was really hoping, I really wanted to play Adrian from Tabletop Titans for the victory, but I lost the guy who played him in the end, so can't really complain too much about that.
Okay, that's a really interesting setup with the 2 stores and then having a separate pod for each one and then being able to pay charity to swap people around. That's really cool.
It was cool. It was really awesome because we have Hammerhead Games, and then we have literally it's less than a 5-minute drive to Game Castle, and they've got a really good rapport with each other, and we were able to have half the pod go over there and half the pod over here. With COVID and everything like that, it was really hard for Tony to be able to find enough space for 60 people.
True. Yeah, it does get challenging. So basically, I saw on one of the Emperor's Children Facebook groups, I saw your results, and as an Emperor's Children player myself, I've been playing them a little bit recently just to try and see what I could squeeze out of the Chaos Space Marine Codex. I saw your list, and it was very similar to lists that I've been running in the past, but with some very notable differences. So I thought, wow, I'd really like to pick your brain apart and sort of see what your results were, see how the units sort of panned out on the day, and just sort of see if between the 2 of us we can share some information maybe to those who are playing Chaos Space Marines and are looking to get a little bit more competitive with it and try to increase their results as well, so that as a community we can all grow is sort of the idea. So you've touched on the event that you attended. What about things like the mission pack? Was it all strike missions, those strike force missions, that sort of thing?
We basically just started from the first mission in the chapter approved 2021 mission pack and went to, I think, the 6th mission. And we didn't really get a lot of, at least I didn't see it. We didn't get a lot of notes on which ones are specifically going to be. This is the first major that we've had in SAC.
Okay.
So it started off as a GT, and COVID and everything, everyone's just rare to play. The mask mandate just ended. So now you don't have to wear masks if you've been vaccinated, and everyone's just excited to play. And it was like, it filled up so fast, and he was telling us about it, and it was like, yeah, well, the GT's already filled, and like we can already get to a major easy with excess people.
Yeah.
So it was like, I feel like some of it was a little rushed a little bit, so I don't think we got the mission packs beforehand, but we knew we were playing on the mission book.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, we've been having a sort of similar thing here where in Australia different capital cities of going from lockdowns to not lockdowns, but often in order for us to get a major, we need multiple, like people from multiple capital cities converging in the one event. And in January, we just happened to hit that sweet spot where none of our capital cities were in lockdown, and we managed to get a major down here, which was really good. But I feel awesome. What you're saying about events sort of have to be able to adapt on the fly. And, we've had a lot of events where, like the Friday before the event, when the event's happening on that Saturday, we find out that city's going into lockdowns. So everything gets cancelled. And then all of the people that had planned to spend that weekend doing a tournament in, say, Brisbane, they might go, oh, well, let's just see if we can quickly throw one together somewhere in Melbourne with half of the field. So it's definitely an interesting time for tournaments. And as a tournament organizer, I've been struggling a little bit with some of these challenges. But no, it's good to see that it's coming back, especially with vaccines rolling out and whatnot. I don't want to get too bogged down on the COVID stuff, though. But yeah, it's definitely good to see. So
the same thing happened to us, actually. Hammerhead Games was actually going to throw a super major at a roller rink, actually, in the middle of town, basically. And he had, like, I think over 100 people signed up, but, like, I forget how, like, 6 months before it was even going to happen. And, like, basically COVID hit right before, like 2 months before it was going to start. And by the time, like, it came to the date, the mandates and everything, we're just like, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, definitely. I think next tournament that I run, I'll probably end up doing some kind of charity thing similar to what you were saying, but something as like a COVID relief fund for maybe some of the small businesses that have been locked out, that sort of stuff, show some support. Because people are definitely hungry for events. As soon as they can, that's all people want to do. All right, so I had a look online and I had a look at your list, and I absolutely loved it. There were some interesting choices in there that I want to pick apart. So did you want to maybe just briefly run us through the list that you run and why some of the units were in, some of the decisions you made and why?
Yeah, first it starts off with, Chaos Lord, just bare bones, double Chainsword just for the reroll ones. Chaos Sorcerer being my Warlord. He had the Reader of Fates Warlord trait from Shadow Spear. And it's you get one free reroll for a caster die for the entire game. Basically, you get one reroll, and then every time you successfully cast a spell on a 6, you roll d6, and on a 6, you can get a CP back.
Okay,
and
so
then
that's
I ran the.
Sorry, so that's a single reroll for the entire game. Yeah.
Yes, it's just basically one free. It basically saves me a CP and it has a chance to get me CP.
Okay.
And being Emperor's Children, the entire list works off of just it's a CP machine.
There's some
That's all.
very juicy stratagems in that for that.
Without the gas to keep the engine going, it dies.
Yeah. All right. So sorry to jump. I just wanted to clarify that one. So what else was in the list? You got your Chaos Lord, you got your Sorcerer.
And then the Dark Apostle with the Relic, which I can never pronounce the name. Basically, though, instead of doing prayer, and for the entire battle round, you get to reroll wounds instead. It's like a prayer that auto goes off, and you get to reroll wounds for the battle round.
Yeah.
Running the Contemptor Volkites, it's huge.
Yeah.
And then ran 10 Noise Marines with all Sonic Blasters and 2 Blastmasters, 2 squads of Cultists, 30 Terminators. I call them the Dirty 30. Probably my favorite part of the list. I love Terminators, and they performed way over my expectations.
Yeah, they're one of my favorites too.
I know they're so cool. The lore, everything. I'm a big lore guy, and I love the Terminators. And then it was Combi Bolter, Lightning Claw on 2 squads of 10, and then Combi Melta and Lightning Claw on 1 squad of 10.
Yep.
And then it was a 2 Dark Apostles. I forgot to say they're in a force, or it's not the Dark Apostles, but the
Disciples. Yep.
Dark Disciples. That's what they call them. Sorry. And then Warp Talons and a Dreadclaw drop pod. And I believe that's everything in the list.
Yep. All right, so there's a few things that I want to pick apart, and we'll go into your games and stuff later, and we'll talk about how these units sort of worked in the games. But there was a few things. The Warlord trait that you were talking about, I personally, I love it. I love the idea, and using the Warlord traits from Shadow Spear is something that I don't think a lot of people consider. I think it's one of those underutilized resources that the Chaos Space Marine players have, that it sort of gets swept under the rug with all the new stuff that's come out because it's only a little leaflet sort of thing. I'm a big fan of the other one in there for the Sorcerers, which is, so you've got Reader of Fate. The other one is Warp Lord, and the Warp Lord, what that lets you do is reroll 1s on your psychic tests. The reason I think that one might potentially edge out as better is like yours, the Reader of Fate gives you a single reroll, whereas this one lets you reroll any time that you roll a 1. And if you're casting 2 powers per phase over 4 or 5 phases, the chances of you rolling 1s in there is actually quite high. So you're sort of getting that free reroll in a way. But it's also giving you the ability to convert those times when you might roll, you're trying to cast Prescience and you roll a 5 and a 1, and it's Warp Charge 7. Instead of re-rolling that and trying to roll a 7, you're now just re-rolling that 1 and aiming for a 2. So I fully appreciate what you're saying with the CP, and I know that the Emperor's Children list is very CP hungry, but I don't know. I think there's an argument could be made for both.
I actually really like the Warlord trait as well. Actually, I tried it at first over the Reader of Fates. I actually tried Reader of Fates in a Crusade League and tended to like it more. The real big thing, I think that the reason why it works in this list, not just the fact for the CP, is that so a lot of the times I will keep 1 squad of Terminators on the field, especially if I don't go first. People will come up the field with their infiltrators or whatever have you, or like AdMech with their Sakaran infiltrators. The big thing is turn 1 can be really big for this list with the Dreadclaw, with the Volkite. I forgot to say before, I had 2 Volkite Contemptors in there. And they already take 1 CP apiece, so I'm already down to 10. The fact that turn 1 was always so important for me, and just re-rolling 1 dice would make it so if I re-rolled a 1 into something that didn't work out, I believe the math actually works out better when it's so re-rolling both dice to try to hit 7 or above. I believe the math is actually higher to reroll both dice rather than 1 dice, if that makes sense. Yeah. Even whatever. Does that make Yeah. So the fact that I'd have a free reroll, I would constantly find myself needing to spend 1 CP to get the Psychic Spell off, like Warp Time turn 1, because I would use Chaos Familiar already to pay 1 CP to change out Smite for Warp Time, and then Warp Time the Terminators up to get a midfield objective, and then cast either Prescience on the Noise Marines or something like that. The fact that it would save me a CP turn 1 was actually it was quite a huge boost to the army.
Well, I guess the argument could be that if you roll say a 3 and a 1, well now you're re-rolling that 1, but you need to roll a 4+ in order to get your Prescience off, for example. And in that situation, you're probably better off just spending the CP, or in your case, doing it for free, and just re-rolling the whole power. So
and also getting the 1. It came out to almost, because it's 5 rounds, getting 1 CP back a game. Most games came in. It was huge.
For sure.
One more honor.
Because when you that term when you get to use Veterans of the Long War that you wouldn't have otherwise been able to do is so massive. So yeah, I think that's pretty good touching on that. The next one is the 3 Terminator bombs. This is something that I ran it at an event a while ago, back in January. I ran the 3 Terminator bombs, but since then I've pivoted off it and I've pivoted more into having a big unit of bikes. I find quite effective, particularly into the Drakari matchups and things like that. It allows you to just, move that unit forward, warp time it, dig deep, shoot twice with it, then charge, do a whole bunch of damage. I've found that bike unit to be absolutely instrumental to a lot of my results. How have you felt that 3rd Terminator has worked, and how does it kind of operate for you?
So, my list usually starts with more than 1,000 points in Deep Strike because of the drop pod being 300 points and it doesn't count towards your total.
Yeah.
So, having the one squad of Terminators and all my HQs and the Contemptors, it's not a lot of units on the field. I know deploy a lot of my units. The bikes, honestly, I had another guy who was running them. He used them against me, and I was actually running the Noise Marines and a Rhino before, and he had hit me quite a few times. We play tested, and he hit me quite a few times with it, and I really liked it. I even started buying the bikes. I got 6 bikes. I was going to look for one more. And the biggest downside for me was when I'm trying to build a competitive list, I feel like the bikes really dependent on getting off that warp time for turn. If you go first.
Yeah, that is true.
Dependent on getting off that warp time. And I don't know how many times I've been playing an RTT and looked like a sad clown who couldn't roll a 6 on 2 dice with a reroll.
Yeah, warp it can be quite fickle, can't it?
Yeah, it's like it goes off every time, but then like round 1 of an RTT, I'm just like, again?
Yeah, and it's one of those things where if you sling those bikes forward and then fail warp time, they're sort of just sitting there and they're sitting ducks. So I do appreciate that. And I think one of the other things to note is that being bikes, they don't get the ability of cover and they can't move through walls. So whereas the Terminators, not only do they have the better armor save, but they also get the the benefits of cover. So you can deploy them in that cover save and they're really tough to kill, whereas the bikes comparatively are very easy to kill. So if you go up against somebody who has really dispatch,
the T5 is really nice, but if Chapter Approved actually dropped them in points to the bikes, I was gonna switch over wholeheartedly. But looking at them, and the bikes are literally the same exact cost as a Terminator, really dissuaded me from doing it. And then on top of that, they have almost the same fire output, whereas the bike you would get, they're relatively the same, but the bike can only have a chainsword, and I believe they start off on 1 attack, getting 1 from the chainsword, so I only get 3 attacks. The Terminators get more attacks, they have higher leadership. There was just too many buffs on top of for the points cost to not justify. 5 inches for 14 inches is huge, but they were the ones that would hold the objective in my deployment zone. That would be the hardest one, or the one that I was contesting in the middle. And then also on top of that, in my Death Guard matchup, usually they couldn't kill a squad of Terminators with just the mortars, throughout the game, and still deal with other threats. And I would take While We Stand against Death Guard specifically, and just not fight them. I would just use Honor the Prince, hit him over here, hit him over there, and then have their blob trying to chase whatever's going on, and I just, keep the Terminators away from them.
Fair enough. I like it. So the other thing that you've got in your list that's a big difference from the way I've historically ran it, and I know this is due to the FAQ that's recently come out for the Dreadclaw, but you've got 10 Noise Marines in a Dreadclaw, whereas I generally run 20 Noise Marines on foot. And then my standard sort of move for them is to basically redeploy them in such a place where they can do maximum damage. And then I'll move them, try and warp time them in, and just absolutely blow my opponent up. I really quite like the Dreadclaw Noise Marine play, and I actually did a podcast episode recently where I discussed using a Dreadclaw for the Noise Marine specifically. But I just wanted to sort of touch on how they've functioned for you. Have you had games where they've dropped down and just done impossible amounts of damage? Or have they been, basically just run us through those Noise Marines and what your thoughts are there?
The Dreadclaw, honestly, I felt like I was late to the party because it came out and I was like, I don't have any units that I'm really going to put in there, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I already have my Noise Marines and a Rhino, and I would do the same thing, but because Death Guard's so big, I always keep them in the Rhino because I didn't want the Death Guard just to bomb them out of existence turn one, basically.
Yeah.
Or at least hurt them enough where it's like, I just didn't want them taking points away from my first turn rebuttal, basically.
Yeah.
And the Drop Claw, my friend said it to me, he was like, I don't know why you're not running them in the Drop Claw.
Yeah.
And I ended up thinking about it more, and he was totally right. And I switched over to it, and Honor the Prince on a Drop Claw is pretty dope.
yeah, for sure. Hitting somebody with that 10-man Noise Marine bomb turn one is spicy.
Yeah, it's real good, and the Noise Marines are actually against like an opponent like Admech who has 20 Vanguards on the other side of a wall. You shoot the other Skitari or whatever your Chicken Walker you're trying to deal with, and then charge through a wall into their Vanguards. And the Noise Marines actually do a lot of damage to them because they have 2 base attacks go to 3, and usually I actually have a chain sword on the Sergeant too, just get AP1. So I figure if he dies in melee, he can't shoot his pistol, but just keep him in the middle of the mast.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a decision I made on that too. And the Dread Claws actually surprising because like with Honor the Prince, because you get to roll before you change the result.
Yeah.
I would make some charges. I was just like, I don't think I'm going to make this. And then like you make it, and you're like, all right, the Dread Claw and the Noise Marines are in.
Yeah, exactly. You do the Noise Marines first, and there's every chance that you're not going to need to use Honor the Prince on the Noise Marines. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, then you're like, well, fuck it, I guess I use it on the Claw. So you can sort of have your cake and eat it too. Yeah, that's really good. Speaking of the damage that those Noise Marines do in combat, that sort of brings me to my next point was the Icon of Excess. This is something that I put on every single one of my units. Basically, I'm sure you're familiar with it, but for those listening that might not be, it basically turns your Death of the False Emperor to triggering on a 5+ instead of a 4+, which then stacks with Prescience to now trigger on a 4+ instead of a 5+. And that turns those Noise Marines into just like Imperial killing machines. So I noticed, do you not run that on your lists? And is there a particular reason? Is that just a points efficiency thing, or?
So this tournament came up, and I literally went through and because I got 20 points off of the 2 squads of cultists from Chapter Approved, and I had like a lightning claw on my captain, and I had like 10 more points or something floating around, and so I had like 35 points that were just free floating. Yeah. And I had actually put the icons on the Terminators, and actually the ones that stay on the field, I gave them Reaper autocannons, I built the models, I started painting them, and then I switched to the Dread Claw, and it just came out to like the perfect math of like a Rhino plus 35 points equals Dread Claw. And I was just like, it just fit. Yeah. And my models were already getting painted. I think if I were to actually change something, there's a couple options. We can get to what I would change on the list at the end. Yeah. But the icon is super good. I think that when I change something, I think I'm going to start putting a couple more icons. I don't know if I do it on the Noise Marines. I think they did enough, honestly, against Skitari. I'm not going to send them into Space Marines. Space Marines are going to kill them with our 1 wound. Yeah. Every failed save, we lose a guy. Every failed save, it's half a guy for them. So it's just too much. And then for the Terminators, though, like getting those extra hits on 5s, I think is going to be worth. The Salamanders matchup was pretty hard for me, and there's actually a lot more Imperium at the tournament than I was used to. A lot of the tournaments we've been having at the store for the RTTs, we haven't been seeing as much Imperium. Like everyone's been off of their Space Marine kit, and they've been playing a lot of crazy like Death Guard, Drukari. Admech just became a thing this month, so like I feel like it's a play I wanted to do, but I didn't fully commit to it. And
it's definitely one of those. I think it's definitely one of those meta-dependent choices. Like some metas, it's like that's an amazing 10-point upgrade, and other metas, it's really bad. And it's always really frustrating when you put it in your list, and you look at the field, and you're like, it's about 50% Imperium, and then like round 1 you verse Orcs, then you verse Necrons, then you verse like Tau or Eldar, and you're just like, wow, what a waste of points. Like, but at the same time, if you were to smash straight into Space Marines, then Sisters of Battle, then Custodians, you'd be like, what an amazing spend of points. So it's absolutely a gamble, but it's a gamble that I personally think is definitely worth it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, honestly, I only played 2 Imperium lists at the tournament.
Yeah.
But both lists, it's Admech and Salamanders that I played. And, both of them would have been a great boon.
Yeah. My thought process that landed me on spending those points was that the Orc matchup and the Drakari matchup and the Eldar matchup, and the Necron matchup, they're matchups that I'm already very confident into. Whereas the Imperial matchups, like the matchups into Custodes and into like Dark Angels, Terminators, and those sorts of things, they're the matchups that I'm a little bit more concerned about. So I was like, well, if I can spend points to make me more favorable into the hard matchups, then it's worth it. That was my sort of thought process on why I thought, you know what, even if they're not effective in every game, the games that they're not effective in, I don't really need them. Whereas the games where they are effective, that's when I actually need every single bit of effectiveness that I can sort of get my hands on. That was my thought behind the Icon of Excess.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of them. Actually, grab this real quick. She literally started to put it on these Terminators. I took pretty cool banner and everything. I started painting them and everything. Yeah. And then literally I painted this guy and then changed it right after. I was quite upset. I was like, I gotta go back to those other guys.
Yeah, that's just that age-old challenge, isn't it? Where you write your list, you do some stuff, and then you'll play one practice game and you'll realize that something doesn't quite work the way you thought, and you're like, I just built the models, and then you're snipping bits off. So the next one that I wanted to touch on with your list that was really interesting to me, and it's something that I don't see done online very much, so I'm really curious as to what your thought process was, and that's the Warp Talons. I see a lot of people will bring a unit of Raptors just to deploy Scramblers or whatever the new version's called. Those sorts of things. Raptors are quite common, but I don't see Warp Talons very much. So what's your thoughts behind there? What's your secret sauce?
So the Warp Talons, when I was first making the list, I had a little extra points. I was like, I'll splurge on the Warp Talons because there would be some turns where it's like I'll drop a unit of Terminators, and there's a lot of Drakari in the meta at the time. And, I'd be shooting boats, I'd be shooting whatever with +1 to wound, just double shooting the Terminators because it's a lot of shots. And the Warp Talons, I really like the Raptors, but in a game when there's a lot less rerolls, there's a lot less that they really go up against and win. Yeah. They're a dead unit. They're cheap. Don't get me wrong. I really like how cheap they are. But when I'd play Drakari or Death Guard, where they have 10 Poxwalkers in the backfield, it was a unit that I could send out and not feel bad about it dying, and they'll pick up 10 Poxwalkers every single time. Yeah. They'll pick up, racks in the backfield. They'll pick up little things like that. And I would always have them in Deep Strike, and then also the Dark Disciples in Outflank, and they would be the ones that get so if I played against Custodes, where I was like, these Warp Talons aren't going to do anything. They do the same purpose as Raptors, where they'd still get my Rod, Retrieve Octarius data, or they'd get my, Line Breaker, or something like that, so they played to the mission really well, but half of the meta list, they would still be able to take objectives and do, my Warp Talons will come clean up 10 witches. They're still decent against, Drakari to counterattack, even if they're there. So it was nice because they still had enough fight to do stuff, whereas the Raptors, they fall short every time.
Absolutely. I was looking at it, and on first glance, I was like, why has he got Warp Talons? Bad. But then I thought about it, and I was like, hang on a minute. Because Emperor's Children get to always fight first, even in the term, you drop them down and you do your Scramblers or your Gather Data or whatever the new one's called, and then when they charge you, chances are you've also dropped Terminators, and your Noise Marines are up in their face, and you've got multiple combats happening. So when they charge you, there's a decent chance those Warp Talons are actually going to get to fight, in which case having those upgraded combat weapons on them is actually premium.
Yeah.
Like, that's actually really useful. And it also means that if you drop them somewhere, your opponent can't ignore them. Whereas they can ignore 5 Raptors. They can just be like, it's 5 Raptors, who cares? I'm just going to, just keep going on about my day like there's no Raptors there. And they're not a threat. Whereas the Warp Talons, it's like they actually have to now dedicate something to deal with that threat. So I actually quite like the Warp Talons.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if they'll really fit in with the list archetypes that I'm sort of pivoting towards, but I definitely think they have a place in the Chaos Space Marine arsenal. So I definitely think it's an interesting choice. I like it.
Yeah, I kept trying, like, for a while there, I was trying to drop a unit of Terminators, and I was like, how can I save points to get the same kind of, like, output? I kept thinking about maybe dropping them for 10 Warp Talons, and they are overcosted. Yeah. The 5-up Invone, the Ignore Overwatch when they enter. It's too much for a 10-man squad, but, like, splurging a little bit on a 5-man squad.
Yeah.
And playing as Admech and charging them in, or charging the Dreadclaw in to soak up the Overwatch before the Terminators hit or something like that, like turn 3 or on.
It's also quite good because you get that Ignore Overwatch ability regardless of squad size. So you don't really need to splurge on the larger squad in order to get the benefits of having that squad.
So it came in like good against Admech just for like those little fights when you just want to tie something up or make them pick that unit to have to pay or to do their fallback shenanigans on like chicken walkers or whatever it is, just to try to like disrupt them and hopefully get them to make a bad choice.
It's also a great way to drain their command points because if you charge them with a big unit of Terminators over here and your Warp Talons here, it's like when you fight with those Terminators, they actually might want to spend those 2 command points to interrupt and kill those Warp Talons. But you kind of want them to do that because you're like, well, now you've just spent 2 CPs to kill something that could have otherwise been Raptors. Like if you had Raptors filling that role, they wouldn't interrupt because it's not a threat.
Yeah, they could have just spent 1 CP to Overwatch kill them.
Yeah. So exactly. So they could have just spent 1 CP to Overwatch kill them, or they could have just ignored them because the Raptors are probably going to charge whatever they're going to charge. They're not going to kill it, and then they're going to die on the backswing anyway. So it sort of creates, there's so much to unpack there. And I think a lot of people just look at the unit and go, for their points cost, they don't do as much damage as XYZ. And therefore they discount them as not useful. But I think they're underestimating some of the tactical decisions and decisions that it forces your opponent to do that not really any other unit can effectively do. The same sort of thing.
I thought about cutting them quite a few times. It's just, like I said, also those Raptors, they just, without the second wound being 1 attack, only getting 3 attacks, it's just, they don't do anything. They barely kill cultists.
I had a game against a Blood Angels player where I threw Raptors into him and killed into scouts, and I killed like 2 scouts. And then on the backswing, this is before Chainswords got AP1, but I threw the Raptors into him, killed a couple scouts, and then on the backswing, those 3 scouts killed all 5 of my Raptors. Yeah. And I was like, this is dumb. This game is dumb. But wouldn't it happen if it was Warp Talons? Yeah.
Like, it's nice because I can run 30 Terminators and it doesn't break the bank on points, but at the same time, like, have scouts kill your Raptors is like Wizard Power Army. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. It feels bad.
It's just the 5-up invone on them too is coming like really useful as well because like you'll throw them like I've thrown them into like aggressors or something like that just to eat the Overwatch.
Yeah,
and they'll kill like 1.5, 2, and then like I've had them live because they're hitting on 4s with no reroll and they just bounced off an invone. I was like, died otherwise.
So the last one that I want to bring up with your list, which was something that sort of struck me as interesting, was the distribution of melter guns or combi melters on your Terminators. So I've been traditionally running 2 units, and I've been putting even number of melter guns on each. So I've been putting like 4 or 5 melters, but on each squad. And my thought process behind there is like I'll have a turn 2 drop where I'll drop down, all the melter guns will shoot that tank, all the bolters will shoot that stuff over there, the Reaper autocannons will shoot that stuff over there, and then I'll shoot twice, and I'll generally will kill everything that I target. So the melter guns is enough to kill whatever tank, the autocannons is enough to kill that stuff down backfield. That's sort of how I've been operating, but I noticed on your list, you've got one squad with no melters and one squad with all melters. Yep. Is this something that you've experimented with over time and you've arrived at that? Or is this something you've just sort of brute logic forced it through? Or
Yeah, it was more like I like to play test a lot. So honestly, it's so funny because like the best part about the Terminators is they got that 24-inch range, just 40 shots all day. And it seems like there's a lot of situations because I have 2 units of Terminators in Deep Strike. It's like, okay, well, they're not out of their boats yet, or, I've got a bunch of Skitarii and I can't get to their stuff yet. And, like, a lot of times I drop down the first squad of Terminators and just double shoot them to clear screens and, like, drop the Warp Talons in to hit a key objective and just make them have to deal with it. Yeah. And then once their screen's kind of, like, more, 80 shots with +1 to wound and, like, prescience, it kills 1 wound models pretty well. And basically, it would open it up so I could like drop down the melter gun ones and try to hit like a bigger target. And a lot of times, I'm trying to save CP a lot of times. So having 10 in the squad, sometimes you just kill on the first shot, and rather than paying the 2 to shoot again.
That's an amazing point because I've sort of structured my list because I plan out my CP when I write the list. So I'm sort of like, I'm going to budget to drop a Terminator unit. It's going to honor the Prince. It's going to shoot twice. So that's 3 CP this Terminator unit. Then next turn, I'm going to spend 3 CP on the next one. Whereas if you put 10 melter guns on one squad, you could probably budget for that first one to just honor the Prince and maybe Veterans of the Long War. But if you've got 10 melter guns, like you probably don't even need the vets, depending on what you're shooting. So
yeah, it depends on what you shoot at, yeah.
It could be a way of sort of looking at it going, you know what, say you've got a unit of 10. If I put 5 on it, that's 25 points I've spent on melter guns, but I'm also budgeting 2 command points. Whereas your method, you're spending 50 points, but those 2 command points you don't need to spend anymore. So you're kind of spending 25 points in your list to buy 2 command points.
Yes.
And that's amazing. Like if I could spend points, if you said how many points would you pay for 2 command points, I'd be like 50 points easily. Like to buy 2 command points, the amount of damage that those 2 command points can give me, I'd spend 50 points to unlock another 2 command points easily. So by spending those points on the weapons and therefore avoiding your need to use the command points, you've actually hit a really interesting harmony between those 2 resources, your points and your command points. So that's something where like I ran my list and I thought I had reached the optimal loadout. I was like, command point, you 4 or 5 melter guns depending on how many points I have available, a couple of autocannons, and then a bolters. I was like, this is premium. And then I ran it a bunch of times and it was really effective. So I was like, yep, lock it in, premium. Confirmation bias kicked in, and I was like, you know what? It doesn't get better than that. Like this is effective as fuck. But then seeing your list, and I was like, okay, well he went 5-1, so he's not an idiot. So looking at the list, and I'm like, there's something here, And it's that sort of looking at your list and then going, okay, what about his list is different than mine, and what about his list could potentially be more effective? And I think this could be one of those areas where I might be actually just objectively wrong. Who knows? But I definitely think that's something I'm going to explore and I'm going to play with a little bit more. Maybe even do some number analysis and sort of figure out, what the cost-benefit analysis. Because the advantage, I guess, of the putting 5 in each squad as opposed to 10 in one is that it allows you to drop down, double shoot, and then drop down again and double shoot. Whereas if you put all 10 of them in one unit, and they sort of like layer their screens where they've got infantry, then tanks, then infantry, then tanks. It sort of means your unit that drops down with the anti-tank stuff might not ever have the ability to dispatch all of their tanks. In which case you drop it down, you kill a couple of tanks. You know, maybe it's knights with guard screens or something like that. You drop down, you kill one knight, but then they kill your anti-tank stuff, and then you're sort of left without it. You were left without that flexibility. So the jury's definitely out on that one, I think. I think I'm going to reassess my initial conclusion. I might end up on the same conclusion, but I might end up sort of circling back and going, you know what, I was actually wrong here. This is actually the better way to go. Especially because if you go up against something like Knights and you're able to drop a unit of 10 melters and shoot that twice, it's like, holy fuck, that Knight army is toast. You know, so I think there's maybe it's a meta-dependent thing. Maybe, you know, if you're in a meta where people are running more mixed stuff, where they've got some infantry and some tanks, maybe mixing your offensive profiles is better. Whereas if they're running pure tanks, and
it also was really nice against like the Plague Burst Crawlers. A lot of people in the meta were playing Plague Burst Crawlers, and like, these guys are so hard to kill. Just because they have an invo and they reduce damage if you roll bad, just in general. And usually they'd be on their own, just like, you know, 3s and 3s. You know, it's probably, you know, 6 multi-guns maybe, 6 saves. And I don't know. We have basically, though, for a long time when I was playing the meltas and trying them out, I wasn't a fan of them. Everyone kept saying just go to plasma instead. Just regular plasma is okay against them. And
plasmas are bad. Melta is absolutely the way to go.
Yeah, I tried both. I definitely like the multi-guns more. It's just, that's why I ended up keeping the third squad of Terminators, was because I liked having the variety of having like one just to hold down the fort, one to clear screens, or it does great against, you know, T3 or even the Drukari boats. Like, I'd shoot the Noise Marines and just shoot the freaking 40 bolter shots with like off quite a few wounds off of Drukari boat before it saved. Yeah, so I mean, it was great for that, and then, you know, being able to just melt against something else for like a for sure kill against like their whatever stuff.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so I think that's a pretty comprehensive coverage of your list. Alrighty, cunts, that sums up the first part. I hope you enjoyed it. And like I said at the start of this video, make sure you chuck a comment below letting us know if you want to know more information and if you want me to get John back on and basically dig through and find out a little bit more information about the secondaries, the strategies, the challenges that he faced, those sorts of things. And make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any future content. Turns out that subscribing to a YouTube channel just tells the algorithm to show you more content similar to it, not necessarily more content from that creator. So if you want to see more of my stuff, you'll have to hit that notification bell just to make sure you don't miss anything. And thanks for tuning in. I'll talk to you next time. How you going, guys? Dean from Blog for the Blood God here, and I am proud to announce that we are finally available to support on Patreon. My Facebook page and YouTube channel have always and will always remain completely free. However, what is not free is the equipment and programs required to make content like this. So if you'd like to show some support for the work that we do here, please jump over to Patreon, sign up, and show us some support. With your support on Patreon, we're going to be able to continue to produce and increase the quality of our battle reports, tournament coverage, tactica videos, painting tutorials, and other 40k hobby-related material. With Patreon tiers starting as low as $1 Australian per month, which is fuck all, you will be able to show your support, and believe me, every dollar counts, it all adds up, and it will allow us to continue to increase the quality and bring you guys the content that you guys love. For the low price of $1 Australian per month, you can become one of my Renegade Astartes. For an extra dollar, I'll upgrade you to an aspiring champion. If you're really keen, for $3 per month, you can become one of my Khorne Berserkers. And for those of you who want to really dig deep and show your support for this channel, for $5 Australian per month, you can become one of my Skull Champions. One of the main reasons for starting this exciting new Patreon account is so that we can get some support and work on some exciting big new projects. These projects include a whole host of new battle reports, both narrative and tactical, strategic, competitive 40k battle reports. In addition, we are working on a brand new apparel line with a whole ton of different designs, and we are partnering with a few different suppliers to work on neoprene objective markers. All of this will be first available to our followers on Patreon, and then down the track available to people who follow us on YouTube and on Facebook. So if you want early access to these things, make sure you jump onto Patreon and show your support. Alright, that just about sums it up, guys. If you've ever enjoyed any of the content that I've put out for free, please feel free to jump over to Patreon and show your support. That support will go a long way to making sure that we can continue to produce better and bigger content every single year, and we are never going to stop, and we will never force people to pay. So, if you've ever gotten anything out of a battle report, if you've ever learnt something from a list breakdown, if you've ever learnt anything from a Tactica video, or if you've ever just enjoyed having my content on in the background while you do some hobby, please show your support and join us on Patreon. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'll see you next time.
One for the Blood God.